She loves to watch. She loves to watch.
Okay, hi. I'm Art Fine. This is Little Art's Poker Party, coming to you from Hollywood on a beautiful day in August, is it? Yeah, 1988. Special show devoted to Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, the SMiLE album. Can you see that over there? I got some panel of experts to tell me about it. Let me introduce my first expert. I got Paul Williams. Paul, it's a groove to see you. Weren't you in the Temptations?
Oh yeah, I was, but
you did a deep voice?
Killed myself.
There was a Paul Williams.
Yes.
Besides the little guy that we know about that's a singer.
The guy in the Temptations shot himself in a car long time ago.
Is that right?
There's been a few others. There's a movie director.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
You're not the songwriter then who writes all those great songs like for the Muppets?
He does my TV usually, but this is an exception. Especially for Art, I agreed to come on.
Okay.
In this incarnation?
Yeah.
This is one of Paul's books, the latest. It talks about, what does it talk about?
Rediscovering rock and roll.
So, it's for people like myself who have been out of it chronically for 20 years?
Yeah, it's for those of us who were tremendously into it at one point or another, and are wondering if there's still something going on, and if there is something going on, am I too old to relate to it or not? And what would happen, if I jump back in with both feet?
Because you're a longtime rock chronicler. I mean, you've been from the beginning, really, right? What was your slot with Crawdaddy?
Well, certainly it's not the beginning of rock and roll, but Crawdaddy, which I started when I was a teenager and a college student, was the first American rock and roll magazine. And that was like January of '66. So I had a great ride. I mean, I got to be part of the scene at a really exciting time, basically '66 through '68, '69, that period.
And that's about how long you wrote it?
That's how long I was really actively involved in writing about rock and roll. There were, other periods since then when I've done some of it, but primarily my book, Outlaw Blues, and
Outlaw Blues.
My time with Crawdaddy as the editor and so forth runs '66 to '68. Okay,
well, we're going to get into the stuff you did in 1966 with Brian Wilson and the great missing album, SMiLE, in just a minute. Let's introduce David Leaf. David.
Hello, Art.
Hey, it's a groove to see you. Did you wear that shirt so you'd stand out, like everybody would notice you?
Well, it's California. It's blue. It's the ocean.
Well, it's a good way to one-up the guys on the other side because you really got a vivacious look.
Oh, that's good.
I think you're really outstanding today. And this is David's book about the Beach Boys. This is the reissue or second pressing.
Second edition, revised, of The Beach Boys and the California Myth, which came out in 1978, and this edition came out in 1985.
So, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. So what else? I mean, and you write and you...
Primarily I work in television. Right now there's a writer's strike going on, so for the last 6 months I've been working over at Warner Brothers Records, helping coordinate activities surrounding Brian Wilson's album, which everybody watching the show should have bought by now.
Right, absolutely. Well, welcome to the show, David. You've been standing to the sides before watching, but you've never been on. Dominic's been on once. Dominic Priore.
Once and a half.
Once and a half? Oh, that's right. You were on one show where we talked about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys for a half hour, and you were on another show talking to Brian Wilson for about a minute.
That's right.
Well, let's see. Dominic's claim to fame, among others, I mean, one of many, Surfing Colors Productions, of course, is what you know him for mostly.
Yes.
But he also puts out this little tome about, this one's about SMiLE particularly. But basically, when he's put out stuff in the past, it's been about Brian Wilson and
surf music.
And surf music.
Phil
and
Spector.
Phil Spector, things of that ilk. Now, this supposedly is, how many pages is this?
I think 263.
263 pages, many of which are reprints of articles.
That's right. I can't take myself to blame. I can blame Paul and David, and
Oh,
they added to the book too.
Oh, there's articles in there by these guys.
That's right.
All taken without permission and with no. Right.
no substance.
No royalties.
No money.
No money. But these guys are great.
If we can now follow this finger, if you could look at this album cover for a second, it's not an album cover you see in the stores anywhere because there's no such album. Maybe you could tell me a little about this is the Beach Boy album SMiLE, which was to come out after Pet Sounds.
Right. What was your line on Pet Sounds that David was talking about earlier, by the way?
Oh, because I'm a latecomer to the Brian camp. I'm a latecomer to digging the Brian Wilson sound, so that I heard my first album that I really listened to in depth was the new Brian Wilson album. Then you gave me Pet Sounds to listen to, and I said, that's nice, but it's just kind of the roots of the new Brian album. That's the way I look at it. You know, that it's a nice warm-up, but this is the album.
That's great.
Wow, that's brilliant to say.
No, it's stupid, actually.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. You know,
Stupidly brilliant. You can be both at the same time.
well, what SMiLE was the follow-up to Pet Sounds, which, if it, as we all know, if it would have came out in 1966 or early '67, would have blown some minds. Good Vibrations was the first single from it, which obviously did blow a lot of minds. And following that up would have been Heroes and Villains and the SMiLE album, which was just an amazing piece. Pre-Sgt. Pepper, post-Revolver, a very crucial time in rock and roll history, I'd say.
Now, I, as a layman, sort of watching the Beach Boys, I like that's Good Vibration. That's a good song.
Yeah.
I remember I went out. I'll say I already owned All Summer Long, that album.
Good album.
And then I didn't buy anything else. And then when Good Vibrations came out, I did buy Smiley Smile, and I said, I don't know. It's got these vegetable songs and stuff. This is all very kind of fun, but it didn't really matter much to me. Now, if I'd been smart, I would have bought this album if it was available, right?
Well, it wasn't up to your being smart or not. It just wasn't available because of problems that happened at the time. But the music that was recorded for it exists. Most of it is there's hours of it. How many hours of it, David?
Well, David,
countless hours.
You've heard
in the last 6 months. Capitol Records has launched an exercise through the archives trying to determine exactly what exists in terms of SMiLE. And Mark Lynette, who was the engineer on Brian's solo album, and Andy Paley, who worked closely with Brian on this album, collaborated on several of the songs, and co-produced part of the album with Brian. And I have had a chance to go through the archives and listen to the material, and there are indeed hours and hours of fascinating music, most of which is unfinished in one form or another, ranging from basic piano demo all the way to an almost finished track that hasn't quite been pieced together. And hopefully, at some time in the not-too-distant future, all of this will coalesce into a multi-CD project that will come out under the title The SMiLE Era or The SMiLE Sessions.
Sessions, yeah. SMiLE Sessions.
Something like that.
That would be good.
SMiLE Sessions sounds great.
Because what we have, what we can listen to is an artist, Brian Wilson, at the peak of his powers, traveling off into a new dimension, taking pop music into a revolutionary era. And that's really where Paul comes in, because Paul was the first person to chronicle this activity that was going on in Los Angeles at a time when Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were considered incredibly unhip. This was pre-Good Vibrations and post all the surfing and car hits, and people kind of looked down at the Beach Boys. Not that they were right or wrong,
trivial pop music stuff.
But it wasn't relevant in light of Bob Dylan and all of that.
Well, Paul, I mean, what you said was that you formed Crawdaddy in 1966, even as a very small sheet. But I guess that made you totally a pioneering guy, because the Rolling Stone impact wasn't until 2 years later. So for anybody, just the idea of chronicling the movement of rock music was unique. So how did that have an impact on you? You came down here from the north, from
No, I was living at the time, when I was doing Crawdaddy, I was first in Boston and then in New York City. And actually, my first visit to California in my life was in December of 1966, when I met Brian Wilson and hung out at his house and at their recording sessions for several days.
At whose urging was this? Were you writing to him and saying, gee, I'd really like to see your sessions? Or were they saying, here's a cool guy?
I had already established myself as a Beach Boys fan. I mean, as David says, I've been writing in the magazine about how great Pet Sounds and the other things that they've been putting out were. And I don't know, it was a guy named Michael Vossi brought me up to Brian's house, and he was one of the people involved in the scene at the time, and I don't even remember how that happened. It was just something I wanted to do, and
The key player in '66 was Derek Taylor. And
yeah, I'm sure it was through Derek, actually.
Now, he was the Beatles publicist, I know.
Right.
Has been over the years, yeah.
Was he both bands' publicist?
Yes. Derek had his own PR. He left the Beatles for a while and came to Los Angeles and started his own public relations agency, which is surely in the history of public relations agencies, this is one of the greatest or most historic that ever happened. But Derek helped really break the Byrds and the Beach Boys to an audience other than, you know, just the mass hit single kind of audience that they had.
From teenage girls to...
Yeah.
To
and certainly Derek was responsible for their tremendous success in England, which was...
So we know, I know from reading your book about the great pressures on Brian Wilson during the period he's doing the SMiLE album. So you were hanging around him. Did he seem to be disintegrating
yes.
at the time? I mean, what was the deal?
Well, I'd met him for the first time. No, the point was that for me or anybody else who came around that scene, you'd never met anybody like this in your life. I mean, there are only a few people like this on the planet, and also we're talking about at a particular time. I mean, if you meet Brian now, he's still this extraordinary person who I'm sure that is very, very special. But this was a particular moment in his creative life where he was, you know, going through Chrysalis or whatever. I mean, just expanding. He was brilliant, you know, from the first music that he made that we've heard. And there are so many ideas and so much power in all of those early Beach Boys singles. And at the point that, and Pet Sounds was this breakthrough in which he was sort of self-consciously trying to make a whole album of a sound that he heard in his head that was extraordinarily successful. And then he followed that with what he conceived of actually as an R&B track that he'd get some girl singers to sing on and so forth, called Good Vibrations, which eventually ended up being a Beach Boys single. And that, again, was one of the most revolutionary single records that anybody had made up to that time, and is still recognized that way despite the orange juice advertisements. And then the next step was, well, you think that was good, you know, we've got ideas you've never even dreamed of, you know. There's stuff we can do with music that it's like if this album is, you know, one of the singles expanded to the full length of an album and as rich in ideas as a 2.5-minute Beach Boys single, well, now we're going to take that and multiply it times itself, you know. And there was a feeling in the air. I mean, in England, the Beach Boys, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones would stimulate each other. You know, I mean, certainly the Rolling Stones would not have made as great music as they did if it wasn't that every time the Beatles came out with something new, they were saying, well, you know, we can't let these guys top us. I mean, let's see what we can do. You know, that spirit of kind of friendly competition where you just really put yourself out a lot further than you needed to for, you know, commercial reasons or whatever. And Brian was just full of enthusiasm for what he was doing musically. And in a certain sense felt like, you know, he completely had the world in his hands. I mean, suddenly they were having a kind of success and respectability that had always eluded them.
And then he dropped it.
It's terrifying to have the world in your hands. That's the other side of it. The story that I wrote that David's referring to was actually an interview with a guy named David Anderle, who was at the time the head of Brother Records, the Beach Boys' independent label within Capitol. And he told the story that I was after that is sort of told in the course of this interview is how did this album that was like, for those of us, including myself, who heard pieces of it as it was being done, the most amazing contemporary music that we'd ever heard, why didn't it get completed? You know, how did it get lost? And there's a whole lot of theories and everything else, but basically, very simply, it was too ambitious.
Well, I don't know if it was too ambitious artistically. I think it was a combination of a lot of different elements, from the fact that the Beach Boys were suing Capitol Records at the time that Brian was trying to finish the album, to the fact that Brian and the Beach Boys were at a certain loggerheads over the direction the group should take. Within the Beach Boys themselves, it was, what are you doing, Brian? Mike Love in particular has been singled out over the years as the guy who was most vociferous in saying, no, Brian, this isn't the formula that's made us successful. And when you listen to the tapes, of course he was right. But from an artistic point of view, what Brian was doing was just so far beyond any kind of rock and roll that you could imagine that, I mean, it wasn't rock and roll, it wasn't even pop music. He was doing classical music within a context that somehow he could make popular. I mean, people have compared Brian to someone like Charles Ives. Brian's never sold insurance. I mean, what makes Brian so incredible is that he was avant-garde and commercial at the same time. And that very rarely has happened in our cultural history.
You know, I'm racking my brain for a real obvious example. I'm trying to think who left the group to become something bigger, you know. I'm thinking Kenny Rogers left the first edition? No.
Maybe Peter Gabriel.
You know, just
Yeah,
there are a million examples, none of which come to my mind right now.
You're dealing with a unique kind of artistic force, just like if you're dealing with Picasso or something like that, that there aren't any real comparisons that
Well,
work.
the simple act of leaving the group to become a bigger, let's say Lionel Richie leaving the Commodores or something,
Brian, he
that
won't
this
leave the
should have
group.
happened.
He never really considered that because it was a family.
But
you
due
see.
to what I learned in your book was that you're theorizing that he might indeed have done that and just left and become Brian Wilson, but the forces of the Beach Boy family and the entity that he belonged to kept him in sort of restrained.
He was the eldest son. Mm-hmm. He was the benefactor. He made them all rich and famous, and that was his job. Mm-hmm. His job, from their point of view, was not to be an artist. And I think that was a force that really was tearing him apart and ultimately led him to say, well, you're not going to have it, and you're not going to have it. And he crossed his arms, and that was the end. Now, a lot of people have talked about drugs being a problem. From what David Anderley says, and David was there from virtually beginning to end, he didn't see drugs as a problem. Later on, it seems that Brian took refuge in drugs to escape the pressure. Mm-hmm. But so David says when he was around, that the only kind of drug use was an amphetamine use to keep going, because Brian didn't want to sleep. He wanted to keep working on the music and talking and exploring each other's souls.
Got precedence. That's Elvis in the Army.
Yeah.
That's what happened too. Dominic, I didn't mention that this magazine that Dominic puts out called the Dumb Angel Gazette, Dumb Angel being the original title of
the book,
Smile.
which is called Look, Listen, Vibrate, Smile, as you can see on that
but
ad
Dumb Angel was the original title.
Oh yeah, Dumb Angel was the original title of SMiLE.
Of SMiLE, of that album. Now you're really fixated on it more than these two guys almost. Not but they've already got pretty good listens to it. Would you say you've all had equal access to the missing SMiLE music?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the missing tapes too.
Now, thanks to you, I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard like a long version of Good Vibrations that was quite different from the single. I don't remember who had it, but that was odd. That was interesting, and that was a work in progress, I suppose, right? It was the
one of the things that we're proposing to Capitol, and hopefully it'll come to pass, is this multi-CD set of the SMiLE material, and one CD alone would be devoted just to the Good Vibration sessions.
I see.
Because there are literally hours of takes and tapes, and you can hear how he put it together. And what we're all trying to say, and what really needs to be heard, is the music. Because when you hear the music, you'll go, oh, that's what they're talking about. This is unlike anything I've ever heard before. When Brian Wilson put Good Vibrations together in the studio, he was working on a plane that has nothing to do with rock and roll or popular music. He was creating the synthesizer. He was creating the sampler. He was creating all this studio technique. He really invented the studio as an instrument in rock and roll. The way that earlier Phil had done.
Phil had a little.
Phil,
yeah.
The Wall of Sound was one way to use the studio. Brian came up with another way that was unbelievably influential on the Beatles, who, when they heard what they did of Good Vibrations and Pet Sounds and the SMiLE in Progress, went back to London and said, hey guys, we got to do something really great. But one thing I have to say, when you asked if Dominic is more fixated on SMiLE than the rest of us, I think the thing that was great for me recently was hearing Rio Grande from Brian's new album. Because on that 8-minute suite, Brian accomplished in a certain way what he set out to do during the SMiLE era, which was to, again, bend the form of the popular song. And on Rio Grande, you can hear kind of what he was doing. I mean, it doesn't have Van Dyke Park's lyrics, and Van Dyke Park's lyrics were very important to what SMiLE was to be, because they were incredibly clever and perceived to be hip and supported the melodies wonderfully. And in and of themselves, you would have to read the lyric 30 or 40 times before you could finally get everything there was. It was kind of like a Firesign Theater album almost.
Or a cinematic thing, where it was, as a lot of the SMiLE music, one of the great things about it was a pictorial piece of music. It's like Rio Grande, when you hear Rio Grande, you can imagine all these things are happening because Brian used a lot of strange things in the music that he did for SMiLE. And what he was doing was something that Pink Floyd later on did really effectively, which was use sound effects as music. And not just sound effects, but just a whole pictorial thing. Maybe it was part of hallucination, I don't know, but it was a big, widescreen pictorial music where, for example, most people can relate to Good Vibrations. When you hear the cello, it's sort of like a tension that brings in. He used different instruments in very obscure ways to sort of get things out of you, and SMiLE was doing that. The music of SMiLE was an extension of Good Vibrations, where the theremin came in and it was like bending a vibration, sort of like My Favorite Martian, you know, where he was like levitating everything.
You make references to Brian's sense of humor a lot, and I just realized now while you were talking, I was thinking Pet Sounds has, what, dog barks?
Dog barking, yeah.
So it has the sound of pets in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Wait to hear the outtakes from that on the Pet Sound CD if Capitol gets around to releasing that soon. There's
There's
a whole session of him coaxing animal sounds.
What sort of earlier Brian material is available now from Capitol? Not much, I'm led to believe, right?
Well, they have reissues of most of their LPs, don't they?
Do they pull a song off each one?
But they pull like 2 songs off. So here's albums that are under 25 minutes or about 25 minutes when they first came out, and now they're like about 20 minutes. So it's really, but hopefully what Capitol will do, we've been hearing that each LP will have some outtakes on it.
Oh, great.
So.
Ultimately, someone will wake up and realize there's a lot of money to be made, and I mean, that's what Brian's solo album will accomplish, if nothing else, at Capitol. Is say, hey, wait a second, we can cash in on this. And
there's no precedent in American records of outtakes. I mean, I buy the Jerry Lee Lewis box set where it's got 15 takes of High School Confidential, and I love it. I listen to everyone, and I say, "Oh, that's a little different."
It's new. Clearly, CDs have finally brought this to us, you know.
Have they? I mean,
yes. I mean, you can buy John Coltrane CDs now that have 6 outtakes from the Giant Steps sessions as well as Giant Steps itself on it.
Is that right?
And it's terrific. I mean, we've needed this for a long time, but the fact of the CD, the kind of audience that buys it, and the amount of space that they have on it, and certain marketing considerations have finally made, you know, the issuing of unreleased or alternate tracks. Obviously, mentally, they're going to think of alternate tracks first in jazz being what it is. But fortunately, we're starting to make a breakthrough where, I mean, given the amount of interest there is in the Beatles, it's pretty ridiculous that we can't go out and buy...
Beatles sessions.
Not just Beatles sessions, which all the collectors have, but there are like live shows from the BBC, you know, where they sing 20 or 30 different songs live. They're wonderful. And you know, with that early voice and energy... And there's a terrific market for that stuff. But it's like people don't even think that way. You know, it's like, oh, well, it's supposed to be the finished record. And I mean, I'm very excited to hear what David's saying, because still in the record business now you can see where there would be a strong mentality saying, well, let's get a producer in who can take all these tracks and put them together into a record that might make some sense. You know what I mean? Instead of putting out pieces.
And it's converted to duophonic, too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they just totally destroy the mono basic simplicity to it.
I mean, we're almost out of time, but that's an interesting consideration. At least the fact that Brian heard in mono, recorded in mono, and any stereo albums, even contemporarily when they came out, were phonies because they were the duophonics, right?
Well, they don't have to be. I mean, Brian recorded in 4 and 8 track towards the end of his peak years, so someone can come in and mix in that. Brian, of course, is deaf in one ear, which makes his accomplishments even more remarkable. But the fact that he recorded in mono, he once explained, was that he didn't think the listener should have the right to change the way it sounded. I guess if he knew everyone had a graphic equalizer at home.
That's the thing. Brian had said that it's all up to speaker placement and where you put in the speakers in your room. In the early 60s, all rock and roll era, 50s also, the compression and everything hit you in a very direct way. And that's what Brian wanted to do, you know. And I'm sure mostly Chuck Berry or anybody else too. Their records were coming out of a car radio, which was just slamming you away. It wasn't this spread out, luxurious thing. Rock and roll isn't meant to hit you in sort of a flaccid, dreamy way in your house. It's meant to sort of kick you in the butt. And so that's why, you know, mono recordings are so much nicer. We enjoy them more anyway.
Yeah, back to mono. That's what everybody we know says.
Well, Brian, like, you know, a lot of great artists through history is a real primitive. I mean, he's just saying, I hear a sound, here's this thing in my head, let's see how I can put it out into music. I mean, he's not coming from like an education of this is this and that is that. It's just whatever you can grab that you can throw into it to kind of get what you're trying to create at that moment.
Yeah, he's totally self-taught. I ran into a guy the other day in a photo lab who we started talking. He says, yeah, I used to work at Wallach's Music City, and Brian would come in all the time and buy nothing but classical records. I mean, that's how Brian learned what instruments did, just by listening.
Right.
And I mean, he is an instinctive genius. I mean, he just knows how to do it. And what Dominic was saying about the wide screen is Brian. I mean, he has this way of making feelings visual. He would say to an engineer, I want this to sound like what a milkshake tastes like after you've been running. Yeah. Or I want this to sound like what it feels like to walk in a forest after it's rained. And it sounds off the wall, but he's able to get that sound, and that's what's so fascinating when you listen to the SMiLE tapes.
Or Rio Grande.
Or Rio Grande. Rio Grande is a trip down a river. It's like a ride at Disneyland.
In addition to the raw genius and musical ability, something that perhaps goes with it, or perhaps it's coincidence, is the personal presence of a creative power like this, who, like, when he says something like that to you, everybody around is just moved, I mean, whether they even know who he is, moved to want to try to cooperate with this person and somehow bring into existence this impossible thing that they're asking for. So there's that charismatic quality when he's doing what he's about.
See, when Paul called it the moment in late '66 when he was there, and it was at that moment where Brian had convinced everyone he could pull it off.
Yeah.
And then it fell apart in '67. But when Paul was there, that's when it was all happening.
But actually...
Good night, but go on.
but actually, he did pull it off, and it's on tape, and we want to see it out.
Yeah, darn right.
Yeah.
Write a letter to Capitol Records.
And it will sell.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, all around the world.
And there'll even be a Good Vibration single with just Brian's voice on it.
Whoa.
What do you mean?
Well, he did guide vocals for the sessions and with the original lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So we could release a single from the SMiLE sessions under the name Brian Wilson with just his voice on it.
I see.
And then there's a version of Surf's Up where he just sits at the piano by himself, and